Hi, everybody. Welcome to another iteration of the Transfer Portal podcast presented by NoContextCFB. Today, we're talking about our Big 12 preview. So, we're going to highlight some of the teams, what to look for, some of the preseason favorites and players to highlight, and then what's going on with Big 12 on a macro level. So, before we get started, just give a quick shout out to our sponsors, Home Field and MyBookie, and use promo code PORTAL, PORTAL, for discounts on home field and for the latest odds and discounts for mybookie.com. So getting started here and joining me on this panel today, we have Mitch and Adam. So go ahead and introduce yourself, guys, and we'll get started.
Yeah,
Everybody
George,
doing?
thanks for. Oh, sorry, Adam.
Oh.
Just totally cut you off. Thanks for having me on the program, man. Really do appreciate it. We're gonna have some fun tonight.
Just like an Aggie that cut me off, man. Never fails. No, but seriously, excited. Think it's only fitting we got Texas guys. Well, I think Miss, you're in DC, right? But
I'm in DC. I'm a Texas fan though,
Texas
even though
fan
I
at
don't
heart,
have a flag behind me. So
yeah, get you a flag, man. We got to represent. It's a rough world out here for us these days.
Yeah,
I'm excited. Talk some football.
Yeah, and speaking of rough world, let's jump right in. We'll start with our 2022 season in review. So, for both of us, all three of us, I should say, season didn't go 100% the way we're totally looking for, but we had some excitement with TCU going all the way to the finals. Kind of coming from preseason projected all the way towards the bottom. So, Adam, I'll start with you. I'll kick it over to you. And, what do you think about the 2022 season, from a 5,000 foot level, how we feel about, the Big 12 last year coming into this year?
I mean, it's just college football. It just never fails. You think you know what's going to happen. And then here comes Max Duggan out of nowhere and he lights it up. But that's why we love it. It's exciting. Shout out to TCU. They kind of showed that you don't have to be a big name if you put in the work and you win those games. Like anybody has a shot. So, and they showed up. People didn't give them a chance against Michigan, and look what happened. So shout out to them. Shout out to the little guys.
Yeah, and people didn't even give Max Duggan a chance. He was preseason on the bench. Yeah, so definitely a microcosm of college football in a nutshell. But yeah, so. Mitch, what do you think about, last year's finishing up, and how does the Big 12 look to you going into the season?
Yeah, I think very similarly to what Adam said, it's the Big 12 is proof that the little guy can still win in college football. Everyone assumed that with NIL and the transfer portal that everyone would immediately go to Alabama, go to USC, go to LSU. And, we are seeing that happen. There are a lot of the power transfers that end up at a school that's a traditional blue blood, but TCU, Texas Tech, Kansas State, they all showed that coaching and development matters too. And when you get hot, you get hot, and it's really tough to stop a runaway train, right? And so I think that it was a breath of fresh air for those of us that want parity in the sport, that want tradition to matter, that want the feel good story every year. Even amidst the money and all the transfers going on, it still showed that we can have that. And that's why we love college football, right?
Yeah, and not to harp on the Max Duggan story, even though it's one of the most incredible stories of the entire year, but it also shows that, the money in the NIL doesn't fully change everything, and hard work and actually staying at the program that you were at originally and earning your way onto the field really makes a difference. And he really put the team on his back all the way for himself going to New York City as a Heisman finalist. So definitely a huge breath of fresh air and kind of a change of the landscape a little bit from what we've been used to seeing. But speaking of change of landscape, some of the more macro stories for the Big 12 conference, the conference changes and the shakeup of what it actually looks like. 4 new teams got added to the Big 12 this past year, huge deals, and that's coming on the heels of Texas and OU announcing about 2 years ago that they're leaving following the 2023 season. So the new teams added BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, UCF. We'll cover them, as we go team by team in our preview. But just big picture, what do we think about these additions? How the conference looks? Mitch, what do you think? how do you think these teams fare in the conference, and how you think it's going to shake out in the Big 12?
I think it's going to be a fascinating season. I think there are certainly some talent gaps. I think BYU and UCF probably have the more natural advantage coming into this season. But that being said, Houston and Cincinnati are dangerous too. We just did our Big 12 preview over on the 3Tech Pod, the podcast that I run, and it was really tough to place those four schools. It was really tough to come to kind of a consensus order anyway. But the new schools, they've got some tough schedules. I think the road games especially are going to be a challenge for some of these guys. And yet I still think you can find a way to get UCF to 8 to 9 wins, BYU to 7-8 wins. And along the way, that there's probably an upset or two that they spring, right? It's just part of the story that the Big 12 writes every year. We think we have it going chalk. We think we know what's going to happen. And then lo and behold, Kansas State wins the Big 12 championship, right? It's got another one of those feels to me here in 2023.
Yeah. And I think it's also, looking at, and a shameless plug for our preview magazine. I'll talk a little bit more at the end about it, but
No shame, bro. No shame.
But when we wrote about, all the teams, our projections and the ceilings and the floors and what we think, I'm pretty sure all four of these teams had pretty high ceilings, 8, 9, maybe 10 wins going into the season. And that's just because even though they're coming from another conference in the group of 5, you still saw them as super competitive. Most of them are very well coached, or they were well coached, Cincinnati having Luke Fickell leave, and they can get hot at any moment. And I think they could be super competitive, in the middle of the Big 12, rising towards the top. So of those 4 teams, talking about rising towards the top, Adam, who do you think has the best chance of winning the Big 12 for those 4 in their first inaugural season?
In the first season,
putting you on the spot, man.
I don't think it's close. It hurts me, but it's not my Cougars. I think it's UCF. They just Gus Malzahn, he's kind of been there, done that, at the highest level. John Reese Plumlee. I think it's UCF. BYU is a little tricky. Not a lot of people are gonna like going to Provo and playing. It's definitely a great atmosphere. They're gonna have that home field advantage that some of these players, they've never probably been that far away from the country, especially these young kids. So I'm going to go UCF, then BYU. Cincy and Houston, they're just a little bit far away right now. Houston's schedule is brutal, but we'll talk about that later on. But either way, I mean, shout out to the Big 12, because there was, for a time there, we found out that Texas A&M were leaving, that we thought the Big 12 was done as a conference, and they seem to have put all the pieces together to stay relevant. And who knows what happens from here?
Yeah, no, they're truly staying relevant. I know they have 14 teams right now, and they'll be back to the actual 12, next year. But yeah, with all the shakeups going on, I think the Pac-12 is kind of on the bad end of the stick, let's say, for some of these conferences. But talking a little bit more about some of the top dogs and where we are in the conference. Adam, I'm going to start with you again, because just going right to Texas and OU, but this is the swan song. This is the last season for both of them. They're both the top 2 odds. Texas is the odds-on favorite to, or not even odds-on favorite. Texas is the favorite to win the Big 12 this year. I think Oklahoma is the second favorite, not too far behind. So what do you see? There's big expectations for both programs. Do you see either of them rising to the top? What's their last season looking like?
I'm not as high on Oklahoma as some people. For Texas, though, there hasn't been an excuse for 10 years, but now, I mean, there's no excuse. Their roster from top to bottom is, I'm not going to say head and shoulders better than the rest of the conference, but it's pretty close. This is your last chance. You're going to get everybody's best shot. You always do. But I think this might be the time. I think this is it.
I'm not going to ask the question now, but you better be ready when we get to the Texas preview. I'm asking the question. Everyone knows the question, but I'll save it. And I agree. I think this is this is it. This is the year for Sark, for Texas. Going into SEC next year, it's going to be super tough. They obviously play Alabama. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Week 2, it's one of the weaker Alabama teams, even though it's still Alabama. And I can't imagine outside of that game, Texas really being an underdog in any game this year. So
if not now, then when, right?
If not now, never. They're leaving.
let's be honest. Let's be honest, because the SEC is not easy.
Yeah, and they need a lot of positive momentum going into the SEC. But yeah. So, I mean, Mitch, what are your thoughts on Texas and OU, and then keep expanding on what is the conference going to start to look like without them? I mean, we know the conference is in good hands, adding some teams, but does this conference, stay relevant for the playoff push in the future? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, for Texas, we'll get into it. There's no reason why Texas should not make the college football playoff this year. I'll save the rest of that commentary for later, but I'm with you guys. I mean, this is the most talented team that they've had in quite some time, and that's in a string of very talented teams. So I think this should be Texas's year. For Oklahoma, though, I think they can get to 10, 11 wins very easily as well. So I'm forecasting a decent season for Oklahoma. That schedule is not that tough. A lot of critical games are at home. And so I think the Sooners, as long as they step up that defense, they should be fine. That offense is explosive. They've just got to stop somebody on third down this year, and they'll be fine. As far as for the Big 12 and the outlook going forward, I think it's going to be just fine as a conference, right? They're adding Colorado. I've talked about this. I have it on good authority that UConn is in. Why that announcement hasn't been made yet, I'm not quite sure, but the pieces are in place behind the scenes. It certainly seems like Arizona is getting ready to jump ship. Maybe even tomorrow, the day after we record this, Arizona Board of Regents is convening. So the Big 12 behind Brett Yormark is, I think, going to be not stronger than ever without Texas and Oklahoma, but it's going to be a very strong conference. And if they can't have two flagship programs like Texas and Oklahoma, they're going to supplement with a lot of very good programs. And, with an expanded playoff, there's no reason why this conference that does play good football year in and year out, despite what critics might say, there's no reason why this team or this conference shouldn't have at least, two pretty regular seats at the table in a 12-team expanded league. So I'm excited to see what it looks like going forward. I think part of the mystery is we just don't know what the final evolution of it is, but the Big 12 will be just fine.
Yeah, I think the Big 12 will be just fine too. And I think, whatever the final iteration looks like, I feel like we're just going to get shakeups, here and there for all eternity with college football. And, maybe every team's just going to join the SEC eventually, and then they'll split off into, 5 SEC conferences, and we'll have the Power 5 again. But yeah, so but let's jump into it. Let's get to our, previews of each team's. We're going to be going in alphabetical order. So for anyone listening, wondering why we're not plugging, some of the top dogs we just mentioned at the top, we're going in the same order as our magazine. So Adam said, no shame. We're plugging the magazine again. If you haven't picked it up, pick up our magazine. It's $10, $9.99. And, the reviews come in. They're competitive with the best magazines on the market. So it's over 350 pages, in-depth articles. Every team has a 2-page spread of previews and highlights for over a dozen players and some other stories that you're going to want to read. So go pick that up. The link to that could be found in any of our socials, our Twitter, our Facebook, and our podcast profile as well. So jumping into the teams, first up we got the Baylor Bears. So Baylor finished right in the middle of the road in 2022. They were kind of struggling a little bit. They lost their identity, some would say, a little bit in terms of, not necessarily running the ball well. But Adam, I'll kick it to you to start off for the Baylor Bears. What do you expect? What are we looking for? What's our expectation for Baylor this year?
So tell me if I'm wrong. For me, Baylor is the hardest team to call in the Big 12 this year. Like you said, they kind of stopped running the ball. They got away from it. And they're bringing in 4 new offensive linemen this season. They have 8 games at home, so I mean that's a positive for them. But of those games, a lot of them are tough. I think what's their opener is against Texas, right? They opened the Big
Um,
12 against Texas, I think. And
it's
then
that week 3 or 4, I believe. Yeah.
yeah,
Week 4 against Texas
week
is the
four
Big
Yeah.
against
12 opener.
Texas. And then after that, they have BYU and BYU's first game of the season, first home game of the season in week 5 and their Big 12 opener. It's I don't know. I I see them being middle of the pack, maybe fifth or sixth in the conference at best, unfortunately, right now. I think they have a lot of things they have to figure out.
Yeah, I think, trying to reinvigorate their running game. Blake Shapen, the quarterback, I believe he's returning. Um, having a returning quarterback, understanding the offense, trying to, push the ball downfield a little bit more. I understand why there's some expectation for them to, get back to what we think they normally are, which is a little bit above 500 and being competitive in the Big 12. But I, I just don't see. I think there's a couple of other teams in the Big 12 that are taking steps, and uh, I agree with you. They're one of the toughest teams to call. I don't know if I see them. I think I see them staying the same, staying around 6-6. But Mitch, where do you have them, finishing up this year and compared to the rest of the Big 12?
Yeah, they're tough to project. I'll push back a little bit on the running back point. Richard Reese had almost 1,000 yards for them as a true freshman last year. Now they didn't have the stable of backs that I think Baylor's had in the past, but the issue offensively was Blake Shapen. For better or for worse, he would go win you a game, he would go lose you a game. Completion percentage just over 55%. He only had 18 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. He just wasn't reliable last year. Now Keytron Jackson comes in from Arkansas. Dominic Richardson comes over from Oklahoma State. So they've got some decent pieces to pair with Hal Presley. My issue is the defense. You bring in Matt Powledge from Oregon as the new defensive coordinator. You lose some of your defensive line, some of your linebackers. Siaki Ika is not going to walk back through that door and be easily replaced as your nose tackle. They've got TJ Franklin, who's a physical presence off the edge. So they've got some talent. They do need to replace a lot of guys in the secondary, but the issue for me is I'm just not convinced they're going to consistently win at home. Adam, you mentioned 8 home games on this schedule. It's not a terrifying schedule. You look at it, if you felt good about their offense, I think 8-4 is pretty realistic. But the problem is, I don't know what I'm getting out of Blake Shapen. I'm starting to believe that Dave Aranda might have had one good season. And I bought a lot of Dave Aranda stock, and that investment has not paid off over the last couple of seasons. So I've also got them around that 6-6 mark. If they have a decent offense, that second half of the schedule, Cincinnati, Iowa State, Houston is about as comfy. I think a 3-game stretch as you're going to find in conference play. You play Kansas State and then TCU. Those are probably losses on the road, but then you finish up against West Virginia at home. I think if you can compete offensively, there is a very good shout that they get to 8-4. It's just really tough to predict that right now.
Yeah, it's definitely they're definitely the harder team to call. I think if all goes well, 8-4 might be their ceiling. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I see them kind of middle of the road, and I don't know if Blake Shapen is necessarily the guy to get you to the next step. But plugging in new guys though, and going to the transfer portal, newcomer BYU brought in Keaton Slovis, formerly known for being at USC for a while, and then joined Pitt last year. So moving over to join BYU as they join the Big 12. We did a big profile on Keaton Slovis in the magazine, so definitely go check that out. But Adam, where do you see BYU stacking up for the 2023 season?
Right now, I have BYU kind of like Baylor in that middle of the pack range. It just it depends on what version of Slovis do we get, right? If we get the USC version, I think BYU might have a chance to, be a tough out. But if we get the Pitt version, then it could get ugly kind of fast. I think I'm looking at the schedule. I mean, it's not terrible. They're at Arkansas. I think at Kansas is going to be tough. In their first game, Cincinnati, TCU. They one of only 3 teams that have Texas and Oklahoma, so I don't think that's easy. Their second half of the schedule is kind of brutal, but I mean they're going to be a tough out. And like I said earlier, playing in Utah, it's not easy. That stadium gets loud. They love their Cougars up there. So I think around middle of the pack for right now.
Yeah, BYU is definitely a tough out. I don't know who we're going to get either with Keaton Slovis. I just, judging by how we normally see quarterbacks that make 2-3 stops, I don't know if he's going to be, the Keaton Slovis that we all had him on the trajectory to be in 2021. But Mitch, what do you think about BYU, Keaton Slovis, and the Cougars' chances this year?
I think Adam's right. I think for the first year in the Big 12, a bowl game would be solid. They have some tough road games: Arkansas, Kansas, Texas. They have to go to West Virginia, which, listen, I don't think any of us think West Virginia is going to be super dangerous, but that's a long flight, and things get weird in Morgantown on long flights. And then they finish at Oklahoma State, right? So it's tough to pick out a consistent run of momentum for the Cougars. I think if they have one side of the ball that I believe in, it's going to be the offense. The issue last year was, again, they could not stop anybody. The defense was so bad that Alaski Tuwaki was fired by Kalani Sitake, a close personal friend, after 7 years. It got Kalani to pull the trigger and go with Jay Hill as his new defensive coordinator. So that's how bleak it was. Imagine firing a family member, a close personal friend. Not an easy decision, but they had one of the worst defenses statistically, especially on third down and getting off the field in the red zone. So this year, they've got to get to the quarterback. They've got to get in the backfield. They only had 15 sacks last year. They were one of the worst teams in the country at getting pressure, and it hung their secondary out to dry. And if you know anything about big boy football, it starts in the trenches. BYU did go out and get some playmakers. Isaiah Bagnon comes over from Boise State. He had 10 sacks last year, so I'm curious to see what he can do. But very similarly to what Adam said, it's tough to pick probably more than 6-7 games in favor of the Cougars this year. I think they're going to be a fun team in the in the Big 12 long term, but this year is not going to be that year.
Yeah, and another newcomer bouncing over to our next team, Cincinnati, the Bearcats. Definitely one of the more exciting newcoming teams, even though they lost a lot of what people saw as their fire with Luke Fickell moving on to Wisconsin and leaving Cincinnati. But Cincinnati has probably had one of the biggest, upward trajectories over the last 5-6 years with Luke Fickell and the number of draft picks and, just wins they've had and conference titles and even making the college football playoff. So definitely a pretty exciting program, but a lot of new faces and a lot of changes with Cincinnati. Mitch, I'm going to bounce over to you first, but what do we think about, the Cincinnati Bearcats in the post Luke Fickell era? How do they fare with the rest of the Big 12?
Yeah, so the good news is your last season in the American was somewhat of a success, right? 9-4. It didn't end the way you wanted it to, but everybody exits stage left. Fickell's at Wisconsin. A lot of guys went with him or went to other programs in the country, and so now under Scott Satterfield, you're a team that's looking for an offensive identity, and the defense that's been so strong the last couple of years is missing its key playmakers, the guys that pushed you towards the playoff a couple of seasons ago. And so you're kind of starting from scratch. Now, that's not any different to what a lot of new programs do under new head coaches, but this year going into the Big 12, their schedule is just not a lot of fun. They catch Oklahoma, they catch Baylor, Oklahoma State, UCF, Kansas to finish things off. If Emory Jones can be the answer at quarterback for Cincinnati, I think a bowl game is possible. I think the defense is going to be the better unit on that team. But you're replacing an offensive line that's got to learn a whole new blocking scheme. You have a new quarterback. You don't really have very many proven weapons out wide. Cincinnati's a cut below even, I think, Baylor and BYU as far as effectiveness in year one.
Yeah, it's tough when you see a lot of people, like you say, exit stage left, especially the power force that was Luke Fickell kind of pushing the team forward, and the amount of recruiting and development he did with some of these players. And we kind of made a comment about this with Keaton Slovis, but whenever you see a quarterback do the transfer portal 2, 3 times, Emory Jones was coming from Florida at ASU last year, and now he's over in Cincinnati. I think his athleticism might help them win or edge out another game or two. But I don't. I think I see them falling below 500. Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I'm interested to see what Emory Jones how he does. I do like that they brought in Xavier Henderson from Florida. I thought he was. I think he's Florida's leading receiver last year. He kind of already has a connection with Emory. I will say I kind of disagree with Mitch a little bit. I look at their schedule and I don't think it's that tough. They avoid Texas. They avoid Texas Tech. They don't play Baylor. They don't play TCU. I mean,
Yeah,
those could
home against
arguably,
Kansas too, home against Oklahoma. So
yeah, though those could arguably three of the four best teams in the conference that they don't have to play. And like what you just said, their home games are the easier ones of the tougher opponents that they have. So do I think the team is good enough to make a bowl game? No, but do I think they're going to be in a lot of close games? Yes. Can they with that schedule? I think they can get 6 games.
yeah, it's going to be. I hate to say it's all really on Emory Jones, but it's going to be a lot of who shows up for this offense. But bouncing to another new addition, 3 in a row now for the Big 12. Adam, your Houston Cougars. I'll jump to you first, but Dana Holgerson, yeah, Dana Holgerson, he's the man down there, and everyone loves him, and he's consistently consistent. But
Yeah.
can he hold up in the Big 12? I think he rocks about just over a 500 record almost everywhere he goes every single year. So
I
what is
mean,
it? What is it looking like for you?
I'm gonna tell you, after last season, morale was very low in Houston. There's I don't know how we were talking about Houston maybe going undefeated and possibly competing for a comfortable playoff spot. That went out the window very fast. But I got to ask y'all a question. Me personally, I don't. I think Houston might be worst team in the conference, second worst behind West Virginia. Take your pick for right now. I do think they have a lot of good pieces to build on. I think Donovan Smith is actually really good. I love Matthew Golden. I think he could be first team All Big 12 if things go right. He's that good. But I got to ask y'all this: is Dana Holgerson on the hot seat? What do y'all think?
I'll be the first to take this before I pass it over to Mitch, but I'm gonna say yes. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna say it's warm. I think he has a buffer of this year in the Big 12. He has his first year in the Big 12 back here, and then if this season doesn't go well, next season it's Dana Holgerson flaming hot seat. He's the next person that we're talking about. And when I say buffer, I don't mean if he's throws up 2 wins this year, he's gone at the end of the year. But I mean, even Vegas has their odds. I know our preview, we do the ceiling and floor and realistic. Vegas has their odds set at 4.5 wins for the year through my bookie, and I I think that's a pretty fair number. They don't have the toughest schedule, but I see a lot of hiccups, with them out of conference with UTSA, TCU, and they're home with Texas, at Baylor, home with Oklahoma State, at UCF. I think it might be a skid towards the end for them, and if Dana Holgorsen doesn't hit that 4.5 number, I think he's gone. But if he puts up a 500 season, I think he's got at least another year of buffer. But Mitch, what do you think about Houston and Dana Holgerson's hot seat?
Guys, I'll be honest. Houston is could be one of the more fun half teams to watch this season. I think the offense is going to be, speedy, go fast. And I think it's going to be a whole lot of fun to watch, just like it was last year, right? That SMU game was entertaining.
Yes. They're
I,
gonna score.
They did score. They just also let a lot of other points get scored on them. Yeah, I think finding bowl eligibility this year would be a borderline miracle. And I don't think it's necessarily going to be Holgerson's. It's not going to be Holgerson's fault in that once the guys step on the field, I think he's going to play with the hand that he's dealt right now. The offseason issues, the comments being made as guys left for the portal, like that's its own separate issue that's raising red flags. And I think Houston's got to look long and hard about, okay, is Holgerson the guy to build us into a contender in the Big 12? We thought he was. We thought he was last year, right? We thought Houston had a chance to go undefeated. I mean, I said that on my podcast that guys, I'm working to see how Houston doesn't go 11-1 and maybe 12-0 in a dream season, and they went 8-5. So there's no doubt they underperformed. There's frustration that comes with that. The problem is I don't think the defense is going to be able to stop anybody. They didn't get to the passer last year. They had a hard time stopping the run. They bring in they've got Nelson Caesar Jr., who I really like. They bring in David Ugwegbu from Oklahoma. But they've got to put it together on the field. And that schedule with UTSA, TCU, Texas Tech in the first 5 weeks, it's not an easy way to get started. You catch Texas, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, UCF. I mean, guys, those offenses are going to put up a lot of points. And if Houston can't match them blow for blow, I think it could get out of hand early.
Take the over.
Oh, George, you're muted.
I mean, sorry, take the over. All right. Yeah, I mean, just take my language, but I do always tend to trust in Dana, but I'm looking around at the Big 12 and I just don't know, man. I don't know. I can't put together a bowl season for them right now.
All I'm gonna say is to my Houston faithful, get ready for basketball season. We'll get it back in blood.
Sure. Yeah.
We'll get it back in blood in basketball.
Oh man. But let's move on over to Iowa State. Iowa State, a little bit of a disappointing, puttering season last year. They finished the season at 4-8. Matt Campbell previously, he was, kind of the picture of consistency, but was that Brock Purdy being the consistency and being there for 5 years? Or was that Matt Campbell able to build up his team into, a conference player, year after year? But how does Iowa State look this year? I'll go to you, Mitch, first for the outlook. But is Iowa State going to be able to make a bowl this year? Are they going to get over 6 wins? What do we think?
No. This could be a really tough year in Ames. Guys, what is this? 6 years ago now, I sat in a newsroom and I said I would love to see Matt Campbell wearing maroon and white after the Aggies had let go of Kevin Sumlin. I thought he was, like you said, the picture of consistency. He does more with less. Let's get him into College Station. And, listen, there's been some ups and downs with Jimbo Fisher, but there have been a lot more downs than ups for Matt Campbell. He fields one of the best defenses in the country. That is undisputed. The guy knows how to call defensive plays. He knows how to recruit defense. The problem is that offense, very similar to Iowa, just could not find the end zone, right? And it doesn't matter at the end of the day how elite your defense is. If you can't consistently score 14 points, you're going to lose a lot of games. And so I look at their outlook for this season, and I really struggle to see them making it to a bowl game. Now, that being said, 4-8 last year, all 8 of those losses were by single digits. So they stayed in the game, right? The defense kept them in the game. You could say that some of those swing back in favor of Iowa State. I choose to say you had so many opportunities and you let them all get away. Why would I trust that they do swing back to you this year? I mean, Hunter Deckers, without a proven ground game, I just don't know if he's the guy to take your offense down the field consistently enough and score. I think Iowa State getting to 4 wins this year is kind of right where I have them. I don't like their chances to get to a bowl game.
So he's, for people out there, he's basically telling you to take the under. So
yes,
but But yeah, no, I mean, you don't really win games scoring less than 14 points unless you're playing at Iowa, like they won 10-7 last year. So, but no, I agree with everything you said. I don't see Hunter Decker as the guy. I don't see Iowa State making any sort of forward momentum this year. I think their ceiling is 5, maybe 6 wins, but I don't have them go to a bowl game either. And I wrote in a preview article about, Iowa and their incentives to score points. And, I see them probably losing to Iowa this year as well. So what do you think, Adam? What do you think Iowa State's chances are? And are they going to take any kind of step forward?
I mean, they can't be as bad as they were last year on offense, right? So I feel like you have to take a step forward. I mean, after that Ohio game, I think they won 43-10. I mean, the offense was just abysmal, but the defense is keeping them in these games, and they just Hunter Deckers is like, I mean, I hate to just beat on a dead horse, but I think Iowa State was, I did their preview. I think Iowa State was third in the Big 12 in passing, right? But they were last in yards per attempt. They just don't move the ball down the field. It's just check down, check down, check down. And you have one of the best wide receivers in the country on your team, and you're last in passes per yards per attempt. I mean, it's just, there's no excuse. If Matt Campbell kind of go back to how Iowa State used to be, run the ball. They were last in rushing last year. Maybe, but I kind of have to agree with the Mitch. Those games that they lost, I think those might be blowouts now. Those close games that they lost, maybe Xavier Hutchinson doesn't randomly forget how to catch a football. They beat Texas.
I was wondering if you were going to bring that up.
Should have lost that game. I admit we should have lost that game. They make a field goal. They beat Kansas, but I don't see these games being that close again. I'm sorry, unless if Deckers figures out how to throw the ball further than 10 yards, maybe we can figure it out.
Jaden Higgins could be fun coming over from Eastern Kentucky. He could be the deep play threat, but like you said, you had Hutchinson last year,
threat, right?
And you didn't use him, right? Yeah, so I agree.
Yeah, you don't win many games in the Big 12 averaging 20 points a game. You just don't. So, but speaking of turnarounds, though, Kansas Jayhawks, they were kind of the darling to start 2022. They started off the season, I think 5 or 6-0, and they're a lot of preseason projections for them to take another step. People love Jalen Daniels at quarterback. I've even heard Heisman talk with him, preseason Heisman talk. I think that's a little blown out of proportion, but Adam, what do we think about their chances and Jalen Daniels leading the Jayhawks?
I'm kind of inclined to agree. It's just I was really down on Kansas last year. Not gonna lie. I'm down on them this year too. So if I'm wrong, I apologize. Jayhawk Nation, don't come for me. I'll admit when I'm wrong. I love the quarterback. I think he might be the best quarterback in the conference. But is he good enough? I don't think so. Not yet. I love what Nes Leipold's doing over there. I think they're very close. But looking at their schedule, they have to end in the season against Tech and Kansas State. They got Oklahoma. They got Texas. I don't like it. I had to go to Oklahoma State. I see them finishing 8-9. They probably get a bowl game, maybe. Their non-conference isn't terrible, so they can easily squeeze 3 wins out of the Big 12. So I think they make a bowl game, but I think it's kind of like what they're saying. They start out really high. Everybody's like, "Oh, Kansas Jayhawks, they got nice uniforms and stuff," and then eventually the cream rises to the top.
Yeah, their first 4 games, they have a couple out of conference: Missouri State, Illinois, Nevada. I think they take care of business.
Mm-hmm.
I think they beat a BYU team week 4, and then they go to Texas. I don't see them winning that. I see them kind of maybe yo-yoing back and forth, but I do see them making a bowl game. I see them at 7-8 wins. I think the over-under for my bookie is set at 6.5. I would take the over on that. I think Jalen Daniels is really good. I don't, I, we'll get to Texas. I think Quinn Ewers is the best quarterback in the conference, but I think he's a close second. I just don't think he has the same talent around him that Quinn Ewers has at Texas, and he can't do everything himself. But I think he puts the team on his back, gets them to 7, 8 wins. Respectable for Kansas. They're on the top half of the Big 12. But Mitch, what do you think? Where do you think Kansas ends up this year?
When we logged our Big 12 prediction, I had Kansas at 6-6, and I think I'm going to be wrong about them. I think I'm going to be low on the Jayhawks because you look at the Big 12 preseason all conference team. Kansas has 4 first teamers, 3 of them are on offense. Mike Nowitzki is one of the offensive linemen, and oh, by the way, he's joined by Logan Brown from Wisconsin and Spencer Lovell from Cal. Kansas has 4 offensive lineman starters coming back this season, plus you get 2 really highly sought after offensive linemen from the portal. So I think your first team all Big 12 quarterback in Jalen Daniels is going to have plenty of time to throw. It's who does he have around him? And you guys brought up questions about that, right? Lawrence Arnold had a tremendous year last season, over 16 yards per catch. You've got Devin Neal, Daniel Highshaw, who, as long as he's healthy, I think that's one of the better running back duos in the conference. The defense is the question mark. They weren't very good last year. Now they got hampered by a ton of injuries. And so I'm hoping the Jayhawks can see a little bit of better luck when it comes to staying out of the injury tent this year. The schedule is tough to find momentum, right? I think if you can go 4-0, that game against Illinois in week 2 is a big prove it for me. I don't think Illinois is as good as they were last year. Not offensively anyway. We've got to see what Luke Altmaier can do. But it's still a very solid team. It's a very physical team. And so if Kansas can beat them at home, I feel a lot more confident about where they go in the Big 12 schedule. Weeks 5 through 7 are tough, though. Texas, UCF, at Oklahoma State as well, right before the bye. And then your reward out of the bye week is you get the Sooners. So it's tough to find momentum. And Kansas, once the air got let out of the balloon last year, they started 5-0. Once they had all those injuries happen, it was tough, right? And they finish 1-6 down their final 7 games. So hopefully they stay healthy. I do believe in what they're doing. Lance Leipold and that coaching staff have pulled off a miracle in Kansas, and I'm excited to watch this year.
Yeah, they're definitely going to be one of the more exciting teams. I think they're up there with Baylor with one of the hardest to peg where I think they're going to finish at. But moving over across the state to Kansas State and the Wildcats, kind of an exciting season for them. They finished 10-4, but they were able to pull off the upset against TCU in the Big 12 title game. Just crazy exciting game for anyone who watched that. But yeah, where do we think Kansas State ends up? Will Howard's back. Will Howard is pretty consistent name over the past couple of years now for Kansas State, but it seems like they have all the pieces to make a run, and they're kind of I don't want to call them the wild card or the dark horse, but everyone tends to focus on Texas and OU leaving the conference. And I mean, how are you not going to talk about the returning Big 12 title team? So Mitch, I'll go to you first, but what do we think about Kansas State and where they're going to end up?
Yeah, so we made headlines when we said that their rushing attack is actually going to be better this year. Deuce Vaughn is gone. He's a Dallas Cowboy now. But you got DJ Giddens and Trayshawn Ward. And I think that's going to be a little bit of thunder and lightning. Ward's a do-it-all back. Giddens is more of the run you over and leave you in a puddle behind him kind of guy, although he did catch some passes out of the backfield. But Will Howard's back. The offensive line should be very good. Cooper Beebe is one of the best offensive linemen in the country, right? Their schedule is tough, but I really do believe that Kansas State can, get to 10 wins and has a real chance to go back to Arlington this year. Do I think they're the favorite to defend their title? Absolutely not. But Will Howard proved that this was his team on offense last year. The concern I have in a pass-happy Big 12 league is, other than Kobe Savage, Kansas State literally plans to play cornerback by committee. And if that works, great. I'm not inclined to think that it's going to be the strength of their team, right? They've got to replace Felix and Duke Uzama as well, rushing the passer. It's hard to replace that production. So I think their defense does take a step back. And I don't think that they're the favorite to go back to Arlington, but at the same time, they get some of their tough games. I should say they have most of their tough games on the road, and that's what I'm going to be watching for this year. I like the Wildcats a lot, but it's a tough schedule.
Yeah, it's tough schedule. Adam, I saw you give him the thumbs down, but I'll let you jump right in here. What are you thinking about Kansas State?
I get a thumb down to the Cowboys. But
that's fair. That's fair. We don't like them ourselves sometimes.
Yeah. I was very high on Kansas State last year. I said it on the podcast, caught some heat for that. But I'm just as high on this year. I agree with Mitch 100% about their rushing attack. I think the by committee approach that they're going to do this year is going to work out very well. They had to at wide receiver had to replace Malik Knowles, but they got the kid Johnson from Iowa. I think I'm interested to see what he does. It's hard to judge somebody in Iowa, right? A wide receiver at Iowa. So we'll see how he does. But I like him. Will Howard, he is his team, it's his show. He seems ready to go. On defense, the secondary is questionable. Jacob Parrish, I think he'll be a fine corner. Granted, you need more than one, but I think he'll be serviceable to kind of slow down one side of it. Their schedule is tough though, and that's where I think is going to be their downfall. I think having to go to Tech and to Texas is tough, especially you go from Oklahoma State at Texas Tech, then you play TCU. It's tough, but if anybody can do it, it's them. I think from top to bottom, they're by far the closest team to talent-wise to Texas. But it's kind of what Mitch said. Those road games, having to go at Kansas late in the year, might be their downfall. But we'll talk about that later.
And an early bye too, right? An early bye in week 5, that is never a point in your favor. So tough road games and early bye. I mean, they're fighting uphill.
I will say though, TCU had an early bye last year, and they did. Worked out fine for them, right?
Yeah, I mean, worked out fine for them, and Kansas State was able to upset them too. So we'll see if they can, continue to keep the lightning in the bottle. But moving over to Oklahoma, one of the big dogs that we're looking at for the top of the conference. Like I said, they were the second for odds with my bookie for winning the Big 12. They underperforming is probably the nicest way I could put it for what happened last year for Brent Venables. First season as the head coach, a lot of hype going in. Dylan Gabriel coming over. That was a train wreck and not what Oklahoma fans are used to. And they got absolutely whomped by Texas, which was beautiful to see for Texas fans like Adam and myself. But it's a little bit I think it's maybe too early to put Brent Venables on the hot seat, but you don't really do well at Oklahoma if you're under 500. But Adam, what do you think for the outlook for this year? Does Brent Venables turn it around? Is Dylan Gabriel actually the guy? What are we looking at?
I do think Dylan Gabriel's a guy. I think I'm gonna give Oklahoma a pass for last year. Last year is your first year, new system, new conference. They lost so many pieces when Lincoln Riley left. I mean, it's unexpectedly left too. I give them a pass for that. I think their offense is going to be amazing. They have so much speed at wide receiver. It's insane how fast they're going to be. Kind of scary when you think about it. I think Dylan Gabriel is still a good quarterback. They're going to have to replace Eric Gray, but I think Javante Barnes is there, and Gavin Sawchuk. Hopefully, I'm saying his name right. I think they'll be fine to be a committee approach. Schedule is a cakewalk compared to some of the other ones. I mean, I'm looking at their schedule right now. I see one tough game, and that's Texas, and then TCU to end. Everything else, they should be heavily favorites to win. They kind of got scheduled a little weird. They're supposed to play Georgia right this year, but that didn't work out. So, easy schedule. Texas and TCU, they win one of those two games. They're in the Big 12 championship probably.
Yeah, I think I think of all the years to turn this around, like Adam was saying, their big test is obviously against Texas, but I mean they're home against UCF, they're home against Iowa State, they're home against TCU. Their big away game is obviously in Bedlam with Oklahoma State, but and obviously Texas for the neutral site. But I think they're going to have a pretty good year. I when I say that I mean better than last year, obviously, but I don't think I see Oklahoma pulling off more than 10 wins. I think TCU might be a loss. I think Kansas is going to be a tough game, and I think I would favor Texas for the big Red River or Red River shootout or rivalry. But um, what do you think, Mitch? Do you think Oklahoma gets back to prominence, or what are we thinking for Brett Venables?
Yeah, they'll have a good season. I mean, Adam's right. This schedule is about as easy as it could be for their final year in the Big 12. I will say, week 2 against SMU, I was talking with Joseph Hoyt of the Dallas Morning News. The Ponies are going to be ready for that game, and if Oklahoma comes in sleepwalking at all, they will lose that game. SMU's defense is supposed to be markedly improved this season, and I think Preston Stone is going to be able to back up the hype. So if they're not ready for SMU in week 2, they're going to drop an ugly one. But beyond that, yeah, I think they lose to Texas in week 6. I think they have a really good shot at dropping either the Bedlam game or TCU, not because I think Oklahoma State is some elite team, but just because it's on the road, it's Bedlam. It's the last year that we're going to consistently play this game, and you're in your rival's building. I mean, it's going to get nasty. The positive for Oklahoma is you have a defensive mastermind, right? And head coach in Brent Venables, and your defense goes 122nd in the country in total defense. Look, Ted Roof, I think, is who we thought he was. I don't think a lot of people were really impressed with that hire at Oklahoma, or at least maybe they were scratching their head thinking he's past his prime. But I think they get better. It's hard to be worse than they were last year, right? Deshaun McCullough comes over, an extremely talented linebacker from Indiana. I think their secondary should be pretty decent. So all in all, I think the road to 10 wins is very attainable for Oklahoma. Can they pull off an upset against Texas? Can they knock off TCU in the home finale? We'll wait and see. I don't think they're going to be favored in either of those games, but it should be really fun to watch.
Yeah, and I'm glad you backed up what you said, because when you said defensive mastermind and just looking at where they finished up in the rankings for defense, not good. Not good. And I won't take it away from Venables. I do think he's a great defensive mind, but I mean, some of that might be in the recruiting that Clemson had when he was over there, and the people he was able to bring in. So we'll see if they're able to turn it around. I do think they're going to have a better year than last year, but again, I think they're kind of hitting a ceiling over there at 9-10 wins, and I do love the idea of that SMU game being a trap game. That's a super interesting game to watch for the second week of the season. But looking at the other side of the coin for Bedlam, Oklahoma State, Mitch, I'll jump over to you first. But I mean, Mike Gundy is, when I think of college football being back, I think of his mullet, flopping in the wind, and him on the sideline and shirtless at pep rallies. Is Mike Gundy going to be able to get the team back? They were kind of mad last year. They didn't feel like Oklahoma State. Their offense wasn't humming the same way it normally does, even though preseason they were projected to be, one of the best offenses in the country with Spencer Sanders. Where are they going from here? Are they getting back to their, Mike Gundy offense and Oklahoma State ways, or what?
I think it feels worse than it actually was because of how much of a flop the end of the season was for the Pokes, right? They started out 5-0 before losing to TCU in double overtime. People forget they had the lead in the first half. They were taking it to the Frogs, and TCU mounted a big time comeback, right? But the injuries started to pile up for Oklahoma State. I believe they had 21 or 22 season-ending injuries last year, and those were a good chunk of starters, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So as you go down the rest of the schedule, you get blown out by Kansas State. You're on your 4th-string quarterback. It makes sense why you would finish the season on dud. The issue then was that everybody transferred out, right? And so Oklahoma State have coming back, I actually think their defense can be pretty solid. They have Kendall Daniels in the secondary, who is a freshman All-American. Colin Oliver shifts back to linebacker after trying to play kind of like a hybrid edge last year that just didn't work. So he's in his more natural position, can play off ball. The offense has a really good chance to be good if Alan Bowman is healthy. For those that don't know, started at Texas Tech, was on his way to becoming a freshman sensation, and then punctured his lung. Never stayed healthy. Goes up to Michigan. Was actually told that he admitted he got a little cocky and thought he could compete for the starting job there, and then sat on the bench for 2 seasons as the third string quarterback. So he comes back to Oklahoma State. He will be the guy. If he stays healthy, the offense can really produce. They've got some fun weapons outside. Brennan Presley comes back. They get Arlen Bruce the fourth from Iowa. Dejon Stribling comes over from Washington State. It's just all around health. Can the offensive line protect the QB? If they can, I think 9 wins is possible for Oklahoma State. I think a lot of folks sold on them after a rough offseason, but Gundy is a great developer of talent. I think he'll have the Pokes ready to go this year.
Yeah, and I mean, self-admittedly, I was one of the people who kind of sold towards the end of the season with Oklahoma State, but I can't, I can't ever count Mike Gundy out. Looking at their schedule, I mean, the schedule looks pretty good. They have Kansas State at home, Kansas at home. Oklahoma is obviously, at Bedlam, the big rivalry game at home. And then their big test at UCF. I think they have a pretty good chance to win, 8, 9, 10 games. And their win total, I think a little bit biased, but it's set at 6.5 from my bookie. But Adam, where do we see Oklahoma State finishing up this year?
I feel like this is building up to be a classic Mike Gundy Houdini. If nobody believes in him, he's gonna use it as fuel. Everybody's writing off Oklahoma State, and then here they come. Next thing you know, we're in November, and we're talking about them playing for the Big 12 championship. It just seems how it works with Mike Gundy. He fuels off that chaos, that doubt. I kind of agree with everything Mitch said. It all depends on quarterback Alan Bowman. I do like I love their offense. It's a Mike Gundy offense, right? It's gonna be fun to watch. Brendan Presley, Ollie Gordon at running back, he's gonna be good. Their schedule is, I think, it's almost as easy as Oklahoma.
Yeah.
They pretty much avoid all the big Texas teams, right? No Texas, no Tech, no Baylor, no TCU. So
Yeah.
they avoid all those. They do have a tricky game against South Alabama. Keep an eye out for that one. I think that's a game they could drop if they show up thinking they're quote unquote hot shit. Excuse me. But we'll watch out for them. But I mean, their schedule, the Big 12, they just gave the Oklahoma schools just a cakewalk. It seems like we need to have a talk.
Yeah, and I feel like you could set your clock to Oklahoma at the, as soon as the Leafs turn in the second week of October being ranked like number 11, Oklahoma State. Like they're always in like the, 10 to 15 range, right at the, right when the season starts to heat up and conference play starts, and they either springboard and continue to put up points or, hit a skid like they did last year. But I'm with you guys. I know I said I sold on Mike Gundy last year, but I can't sell a Mike Gundy. I can never sell a Mike Gundy. I see them blowing past their 6-win or 6.5 win, over under. I think they get 7, 8, maybe 9 wins, and I would not be too surprised if they have double digits, honestly. But yeah, no, it's definitely pretty exciting. Definitely going to be a pretty exciting offense to watch and see if Mike Gundy can, pull another rabbit out of the hat. But speaking of rabbits out of the hat, the ultimate rabbit out of the hat last year, the TCU Horned Frogs, coming from preseason, I think everyone had them towards the bottom, if not in the bottom of the Big 12, and Max Duggan on the bench behind Chandler Morris. But against all odds, TCU, they delivered. They won a bunch of exciting games. And we thought maybe it was a couple of fluky games, and they went and took it to Michigan and went all the way to the national championship. I know it's a different outlook this year, different team this year, but they're still going to be an exciting team, and you can't count out TCU, obviously, after everything they put together last year. But I'll bounce it over to you, Mitch. Where do we see, TCU this year? I'm not going to ask if they're going to repeat the performance they had last year because that's almost unfair to even put that on them. But
Yeah.
what does it look like?
I think this is going to be as strong a sophomore campaign that Sonny Dykes can have without truly just queuing up a sequel to the Cinderella story they had last year. I mean, I did not have them making a bowl game last year. Straight up, had them at 5-7. And you weren't going to be hard pressed to find folks that were going to disagree with you. They just had so many unproven pieces around that roster, and they all stepped up. And it was truly a magical season. This year, I'm a little bit concerned about Chandler Morris. I know he won the job last year, but throughout his career, he's never been the guy. And in this one final shot, to say that he's going to repeat Max Duggan's performance, I think is a little bit of a stretch. So I'm nervous about the quarterback position. That being said, though, this offense should be a lot of fun. They're loaded at the skill positions. I mean, Trey Sanders comes over from Alabama. Imani Bailey's there, 8.1 yards a carry last season. The wide receiver room is disgusting. Savion Williams will be the Quentin Johnson replacement. JoJo Earl, a local kid, comes back from Alabama. John Paul Richardson comes down from Oklahoma State. So the offense should be a ton of fun. They do have to replace the interior part of that offensive line. They had 3 guys get drafted. But then the defense should be really good too. All around every level of that defense, they've got a lot of fun difference makers. Johnny Hodges at linebacker. Dominic Williams played 611 snaps as a true freshman defensive tackle. He'll lead that defensive line this year. But getting to the schedule, it's certainly a tough finish. And for that reason, I think TCU probably drops 2 to 3 games. I mean, after that late bye, they go to Texas Tech, home against Texas, home against Baylor, at Oklahoma. That's a tricky 4-game stretch. And to think that I think it would be a success if TCU got out of that going 2-2, right? So I think 9-3 is probably a pretty fair number. They've got Kansas State before the bye. Again, SMU's on their schedule as well. The Ponies are not happy about how the Iron Skillet went last year. So TCU has a good year. It's not elite though.
Yeah, and I think their schedule is their, obviously aside from Chandler Morris, I think their schedule is their biggest, their biggest limiting factor this year. I know they pulled out a lot of close games. You're not going to get everything bounce in your favor every single year. I do think Sonny Dykes was a great hire. I think he's doing a really, really good job. I do think they're going to beat their projected over under of 6.5 that my bookie put out. But looking at their schedule, SMU's a tough game. Iowa State, not really necessarily easy, and then the second half is just brutal. Right before the bye, BYU, Kansas State, and then Mitch, like you said, the Texas Tech, Texas, Baylor, Oklahoma. I do see them going 7-8 wins, but I think that's kind of the ceiling. I see them going back to a bowl game. But Adam, what do you see for the Horned Frogs?
It's kind of, can they catch lightning in a bottle again, right? You have a whole new system, new coach, new coordinators, a whole new team, and everything just clicks and it keeps clicking. And then can they pretty much have to redo it, because I think what are they, 120th in returning production or something like that, something in the nation. Like, have a new OC. Garrett Riley is at Clemson. I think Browse is fine, but that to be able to click like how they did so quickly and to keep that going, I just don't see them being able to do that again. I will say they have a shot because the start of the schedule is kind of easy. They have time to kind of get those pieces to gel, I guess. They're not the non-conference game. They have Colorado. I think they handle Colorado. Nichols, Houston, SMU, West Virginia, Iowa State. They have time, right? They can make their mistakes before they get to that second half where things get crazy. Things get brolic real fast. I think they hammer the over 6.5 though. I think that's easy money on my bookie code portal if you want to win some money.
I love the plugs, but no, I agree. I think one of my biggest holdups was, would Chandler Morris just mentally bounce back and be able to really take the reins. And it's it's got to be pretty demoralizing, even though you're on a team that goes to the national championship. You were still the guy that just couldn't really do it, and you watch someone parade all the way to New York and go to the Heisman ceremony. So I don't want to put unfair expectations on Chandler Morris, but it's going to be he's got big shoes to fill. So we'll see if he's able to do it. And speaking of big shoes to fill, I promised I would hold off on this question until we got to this part of the podcast, but we're here now, the Texas Longhorns. Adam, I'm going to go to you first. I need the answer to the question. Is Texas back?
We're back.
All right.
Now, all bias aside, we talked about it earlier. There's no excuse. I don't want to hear any about injuries. There shouldn't be excuse for injuries. You have two great quarterbacks. You have a plethora of running backs. I'm not even going to talk about their riches at wide receiver. It's insane. Defense, they have a lot of returning production. They have Jalen Ford's back, Ryan Watts, Byron Murphy. They got Jalen Cattle on now. It's all hands on deck. And I think if it goes badly, those boosters at Texas, they're not going to go to the SEC and start sucking. I promise you that much. The last thing they're going to do is spend all that money and then be little brother to Texas A&M. That's the last thing they want. So if it doesn't start, things don't start clicking, changes will be made. But I think it will. That's all I have to say. We're back.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. I every year I buy in. Every year I think Texas is back. Every year I'm ready to get heartbroken, and it always seems like it always seems like I'm heartbroken at the most inopportune time, the most inopportune game. I watch them. Alabama, I get it. Like, it's a close game. They're the preseason number one. We played super well. Quinn got injured, but then dropping games against Texas Tech in overtime. Just miscues, things that I just don't really understand what the holdup is, what doesn't click, why they can't take that next step. But everything, all the stars seem to be aligning for Texas this year. Even obviously, talking about the receiving core and Quinn Ewers and having everything lined up. You mentioned their depth at quarterback. They have three people that I would argue in their college careers could compete for a Heisman. I know, people sleep on Malik Murphy, but the dude is a baller. And then obviously Arch Manning, sitting third string on the bench. But my expectations are the ceiling for Texas, and that's really it's really Big 12 or bust for them. I think of all the years to do it, this is the year. I hate calling it a down year for Alabama, but I mean, they struggled to even find a quarterback and went into the transfer portal and got the kid from Notre Dame, Tyler Buckner, over from Notre Dame, who lost his starting job at Notre Dame. So Alabama's scrambling when they're doing that. It doesn't mean they're not going to be Alabama, but week 2, Texas, their offense should be clicking, and then their schedule is not the easiest schedule, but you got obviously neutral site Oklahoma, Kansas State at home, at TCU. And then at Iowa State, then finish with Texas Tech. There's no reason in the world Texas should not go, 11-1, 12-0 for the schedule. But Mitch, we got our biases out of the way. We'll try and get you to center us. What do we think? Is Texas back? Where do we see the Longhorns this year?
I've shocked everyone that I've talked to. I'm with you guys. Like, Texas should go 11-1 at a minimum to me this season, right? They have no excuse not to beat everybody but Alabama, and that's really because it's on the road. But I'm going to pick Texas to beat Alabama on the road. They've got the better offense this season. I'm not on board the Quinn Ewers for Heisman hype train. I think 58% completion last season, and at times a real struggle to connect in the big moments, to me dampers that excitement. Does he have the ability to? For sure. I mean, that wide receiver room might be the best in the country. He's got in my opinion, a top 5 offensive line protecting him this season. You don't have Bijan Robinson. I get that, but you got a stable of talented running backs to balance out the offense. So for me, it's like if Quinn can't do it this year, I don't think he can do it anywhere. My question to you guys: Texas is my pick to win the Big 12. Texas is my pick, likely to go to the college football playoff. If Quinn can't get it done, and you do have to go to a Malik Murphy, you do go to Arch Manning, which I think that would be a mistake as a freshman, but whatever. Let's play the thought experiment. If Quinn can't get it done, one, what's the issue for Quinn? And two, what does the new ceiling become for the Longhorns?
So I'll jump in first. So you're saying if Quinn can't get it done, let's say, massive struggles week 1, 2, and 3, and then we're talking about replacing him after that. What's
Yeah.
our
Yeah, I mean, look, like Rice and Wyoming, I don't know what the struggles would be. I think probably struggling to, having some bad overthrows, right? A throw into coverage, missing a safety, he throws a pick against one of those schools. But I think on the road at Alabama, he has a sub 55% completion percentage, is really struggling to move the chains. Maybe he struggles at Baylor as well. It gets to the point where it's like the season is certainly not over. We can run the table in the Big 12. We need to do something else. We need to figure out who can take over this offense. Literally handed the keys to the Lamborghini. If you do have to do that, though, does the ceiling change at all? Is Murphy able to come in and pick up the slack?
I think the ceiling is still the high ceiling is still the exact same. I think the floor goes slightly lower. I think, Kansas State and Oklahoma games are, way more in question, but I do think truthfully people sleep on Malik Murphy. I think he's an Elite 11 finalist, absolute monster prospect, and people just saw Arch Manning and their eyes lit up and they just kind of forgot what the QB room actually looks like. I mean, you look at all three of the quarterbacks together in a picture, and Malik Murphy looks like an NFL player standing next to the other two. So he's got all the talent in the world, insane arm talent, ball zips out of his hand. But I would say Sark is super creative on offense. I think they would be able to pick up the pieces and at a minimum still win 9 games if Malik had to take over, let's say week 1 or 2. But I mean, Mitch, I think we're going to try and get you on, by the time the season rolls around, get you on the Quinn Ewers hype train. If I think Quinn Ewers makes the most incredible throws, and then if he could just hit an open guy, his completion percentage, but it's nuts. Like he's got someone, doing a wheel route and he's got them open by 10 yards and just gets happy feet. So I think another season, just full camp as the starter, there was never really a competition. He's just able to throw to his receivers, get everyone in the same room. Sark has his hands on him for another year. I do think he's a QB whisperer. I mean, I think the sky's the limit for this team and for Quentin. So I know I talked a lot, Adam, but I know
I love it.
You're a big fan of the QB room too. But go for it, man. What do we think? And then I'll give you the same hypothetical that Mitch threw at me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's there. Like I said, there's no excuse. I think I will personally. I want to see Malik Murphy play just because I just want to know what he has. I think he's really good. I wish he didn't get hurt last year because I think we might have seen him last year when Quinn had those struggles that Mitch talked about. Unfortunately, unless we're probably not going to, you might not even see him even suit up for the Longhorns unless something does happen. But I want to see him. I think he's really good. I don't think the floor gets lowered by that much, if at all, because they're different styles of players, but Malik opens up a lot of other things for the offense that Quinn just can't do, right? When it's not really a runner, Malik is just a different aspect. Sark is proven a great offensive mind. As far as the Big 12 goes, there's no excuse. We shouldn't lose a beat. As far as win this nationally, then yes, I think Quinn's ceiling is a lot higher than Malik's. But again, there's no excuse because unfortunately, Mitch's Aggies I think they're going to be really good too. And if Texas is bad and Texas A&M is winning, which I think they will be, that's not great for the brand.
Texas won't be bad this year. I have no doubt Texas will be a good team. The question is just truly, will they be an elite team? And, if there was anybody that was going to say, no, they're not, and here's why, it would probably be someone like me, right? And there's no way you can rationally argue Texas should not be elite this year. They should be back, right? They put the joke aside. Texas should be back. They should go 11-1. They should have a chance at the college football playoff. Plain and simple.
Let me ask you this: Texas and A&M play this year. What's the spread?
Oh, that's a good
neutral
question.
Site. We'll say neutral site.
Yeah. Okay. So that was my next question. I would say Texas probably by 3.5, 4. I think Texas's offense is much, much better than what the question mark of A&M is. At the same time, A&M had an elite pass defense last year. Now, some of that is because they were really good at defending the pass. Some of it was because you didn't have to throw on the Aggies to beat them. You could just run the ball. But that being said, Texas A&M's defense is going to be as legit as Texas's offense should be, right? So I think that would be a clash of the Titans. Texas is the better team today. I have no problem admitting that. Texas is the better team today. Last year, I did not think that, and the script got flipped. Going into next year, it's going to be a ton of fun to see where those two teams are. But Texas is the better team today, and they would win that game.
Yeah, I would probably set it at 6.5, Texas 6.5, but I do think Texas is a better team, but Texas's biggest Achilles heel is when they have expectations. That's when, the lights tend to shine a little bit too bright for them. So we'll see, how they end up, but everything is lining up for, this to be their swan song and to kind of drop the mic as they leave the Big 12 and hopefully bring the Big 12 to the playoffs. So, but to dip around to another side of the state and keep going with our preview, Texas Tech Red Raiders, pretty good season last year. I think people weren't really sure completely what to expect, but finished the season 8-5. For first year head coach was Joey McGuire, but where did they end up? Tyler Show, where's Texas Tech going to end up in the landscape of the Big 12 this year? I'll flip it over to you, Mitch, first.
Yeah, I think Tech has a really good chance to go 8-4, 9-3 this season. They are positioning themselves to be one of the front runners of the new look Big 12 right now. Again, we'll see what Pac-12 teams come over. It could be, we're hearing Arizona's coming, maybe Washington and Oregon tack on board as well. If the Pac-12 media rights deal is as low as it's reportedly being, about $20 million plus streaming, I think you're going to have the big boys trying to jump on board. But from the Big 12 that we know right now, Texas Tech should be one of those better teams. My prediction and my, hot take, if you will, I think they beat the Oregon Ducks in week 2. Tyler Shuck is healthy. And when he is healthy, he's a great quarterback. I truly believe that the offense should be a whole lot of fun. And the defense continues to take strides. Joey McGuire is one of the best developers of talent at the high school level. I covered him when he was at Cedar Hill. He knows how to get the most out of his players, and he's a guy that is really revolutionizing the way that coaches look at and scout, kids that don't have stars or kids that are under-evaluated by the traditional recruiting services. It's only year 2, though, so I can't say that Tech has the inside track to get one of those spots in Arlington, but I think they're going to be a whole lot of fun. I think they're right below that tier of Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas State.
Yeah, and they have a little bit of a rough schedule. I mean, you mentioned the Oregon game, but yeah, they got at Baylor, at BYU, TCU, then finish the season with at Kansas, home against UCF, and then at Texas. So a little bit rough of a draw, especially in the later half of the season. But where do you see Texas Tech ending up this year?
I'm actually very high on Texas Tech this year.
Okay.
Kind of for the reason that Mitch said. I love what Joey McGuire is doing. And I feel like Tyler Shuck, I think he's a good quarterback. Injuries kind of helping him. He's undefeated, right? He's 8-0 as a starter in his career or something like that. I think the schedule is a little tough, but not early on. I think they have a chance to front run in the Big 12. I can see them. I think they beat Oregon. Sorry, Dylan. I got I
Welcome.
got I got them going 6-0. I think I did their preview. Their ceiling for me is legit. They can win 10, 11 games. I think. I
Mm.
think I think that team is that good. I think they're in a great position to take over the new Big 12. It wouldn't surprise me to see them in the Big 12 championship. I think it's going to come down to tiebreakers. I think between them, Texas, and Kansas State, who wins, who things might get a little weird with the tiebreaker situation, but I'm very high on Texas Tech.
Okay. And then, jumping over to, we mentioned the new Big 12, but the last new addition to the Big 12, the UCF Knights, pretty exciting addition. They're definitely a really exciting team with Gus Malzahn running the ship over there, and I think John Reese Plumlee, excuse me, is one of the most exciting players in college football. I know they always make a big deal about him being a two-sport athlete, but the guy's a baller, and just every time he gets the ball in his hands, I'm like, I get nervous that he's going to break one or have a broken play, go for 80 yards or something like that. But they're definitely one of the harder teams, I think, to judge hopping into the Big 12 and seeing where they end up. But Adam, I'll go to you first here. But where do we see Gus Malzahn's Knights ending up with the Big 12? Are they going to be a bowl contender or what?
Yeah, I think they get a bowl game. I got them kind of in the upper half. I think I mentioned earlier for me they're the most Big 12 ready team out of the newcomers because then you mentioned John Reese Plumlee, Gus Malzahn. They kind of it's at UCF. It's an expectation that you win, right? They treated that program like a Power Five for a while now. Is something that I don't think for some of the other teams, I think it might be kind of new, like the experience. I think UCF is just business as usual. Let's go in, keep our head down. I can see them going 8-4, 7-5. They get a bowl game. And I think they'll be fine. I think they have a great market over there in Florida. They're in Orlando, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're over in
They're in
Orlando.
Orlando. The fans love them over there. It's gonna be a tough place to play. Yeah, I got them winning 7 games, 8 games.
Yeah, Mitch, what do you think? How do you think they fare?
Yeah, that's kind of where I've got them going to 7-5. I think 8-4. It's tough to get their ceiling above 8-4 with this schedule now. I will say I thought they had one of the trickier non-conference starts. They host Kent State, then they go to the Blue Turf to play Boise State. But today we shared this in our group text. Latrell Caples is going to miss the season with a lower leg injury. I don't know if that's an ACL or what it is, but a big weapon for the Broncos is now done for the season. That doesn't mean that road trip gets any easier necessarily, but it certainly limits at least part of what Boise State can do on offense. Going to Kansas State and Kansas, then in 2 of the next 3 weeks after non-conference, that's brutal. I think we're going to figure out really quickly what UCF can bring to the table this season. They go to Oklahoma, they go to Cincinnati, they go to Texas Tech. Now they don't get Texas, which is a big plus. But catching both Oklahoma schools hurt. So I think going back to what we said at the very beginning, if there is a newcomer that surprises everybody that makes it to Arlington, it would be UCF. I just don't know that they're quite ready to get there in year one. But Adam, as you mentioned, they're used to winning. Guys, they have a recent national championship, right?
Yes. I was wondering if somebody's going to mention it.
Yeah, I think I love watching John Reese Plumlee play, and I'll have a piece coming out, relatively soon about, my one of my things that I love to bet on is big name coaches at small schools, I call it. And while they're not necessarily a small school anymore, this is the Gus Malzahns of the world who we recognize from big powerhouse programs trying to make a name and trying to just blow the doors off from a group of 5 now jumping into the Big 12 team. or Big 12 conference, I think they're going to be pretty exciting. So I see them hitting their over 6.5 wins, going 7-5, 8-4. And I think they're definitely, I don't know if they necessarily have a chance to get to the title, but I do see them being an exciting team. And wrapping up the Big 12, last but perhaps least, but we'll talk about it. The West Virginia Mountaineers. They're not necessarily the best, change of pace for where they wanted to be. They've ended the season 5-7 last year. So a little bit of a sputter for what we've traditionally been used to, let's say, with West Virginia in the Big 12. But has West Virginia turn out this year? I'll kick it over to you, Adam, first. But I personally have them probably at the bottom of the Big 12, maybe next to like a Cincinnati. But where do you have them ranked in your Big 12 to finish the year?
I hope they sell alcohol in that stadium because it could get ugly.
I don't think there's going to be any couches burned over there this year. So.
The tailgate's going to be lit. Come out Saturday, have a good time. Don't expect to see that much good football, unfortunately, this year. I like CJ Donaldson Jr., the running back. I think Zach Frazier is going to be a first-round pick in the draft, but other than that, I don't know. Maybe they're good at soccer or baseball. Fortunately, this year that's just how it is. That's just the nature of football. It's up and down.
And it's also a little bit of a tough draw too. I mean, their schedule is brutal. They got
brutal.
Yeah, they're non-conference. They got at Penn State and then versus Pittsburgh at home, and then they go right into the gauntlet of Texas Tech and TCU.
How many wins do y'all see on that schedule? I see one.
You see one win
total?
Yeah.
I see
wow.
I see 3 to 4.
You see 4 wins?
I see 3-2-4. So 3 I think 3 is more realistic. I'm taking the under of 4.5 wins. So let me put that out there. But I think they have Duquesne, they got week 2. No offense, Adam Houston. I think it's gonna be the basement shootout, and then I think they got BYU if they sputter, and then Cincinnati. I think they're big chances to pull some W's, but it's kind of it, man.
Disrespectful. I'll point to week 10 BYU. Like I said earlier, that's a long flight from Salt Lake City, right? Or from Provo. I'm sorry. So I think BYU is, they pulled an upset against Baylor. I know Shapen got hurt. Kyron Drones had to come in cold, but they did beat a Baylor team that at that point, the bottom had not fallen out of that schedule yet, right? So it truly was an upset. West Virginia always gets a team or two at home. Do they suck on the road? For sure. But they always seem to get a team or two at home. That starts the season. I mean, you're legitimately talking about a 1-4 start if Pitt gets them. I'm not very high on Pitt this year, but if they get West Virginia, I don't even know that Neil Brown is employed after the bye week. And I thought it was a little bit rich that Brown came after the media at Big 12 Media Days saying, oh, you're overlooking us after picking us last in the conference. And it's like, man, give us something to look at then. Your secondary is going to be bad this year. There's no depth along the defensive line. Last year, when we did West Virginia's preview, we had Mountaineer fans coming after us saying we didn't do our research. We had no idea who was on the roster. And our whole counter was, guys, like, I know you believe in the people that you have on that roster, but I don't think anybody else does. And we certainly don't believe in your head man. This year, it's kind of ratcheted up to an extreme where Garrett Green is your quarterback. Find me somebody that believes in him. 55% completion last year, 5 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Like, he's just not a game changer. And you talk about this schedule, it would truly be a miracle if West Virginia makes it to a bowl game. I know that may sound harsh. I'm just looking at the schedule in front of me, and I find 8 to 9 teams that are better than them on that schedule.
Yeah, and they're going to point to the miracle, and they're going to point to TCU last year. I don't see I see four wins as an extremely hard ceiling, excuse me. But
Well, West Virginia is not the next TC. We'll bet the farm on that.
yeah, I think we're all in favor of taking the under on their wins. But Adam, you don't see them getting a single conference win?
I think that they do get one, but it wouldn't shock
Okay.
me in the slightest if they get blanked. And I'm
Okay.
like, I wouldn't bet on them to win one game in the conference. Respectfully.
Man, I hope the West
Respectfully,
Virginia
of course.
fans don't turn off the podcast at this point. But let's round it out. We gotta we'll finish off with a couple of key players and highlights, and then get into our predictions, and then wrap up. But I'm gonna go to you to Mitch first. But give me one or two people on offense, one or two people on defense that you're excited about. So potential player of the year, but really someone that you're looking to watch either have a breakout year or just it could be someone that already has expectations that just balls out.
Yeah, I think offensive player of the year. I think quarterback wise, it's should be one of three names. It should be Quinn Ewers, it should be Will Howard, or it should be Jalen Daniels. Right? I mean, Jalen Daniels had the highest QBR in the country last year, so there's no doubt that I think he has the goods to back it up. Officially, with my predictions, I have to go Quinn Ewers as the offensive player of the year. Last year, I picked Bijan to be my Heisman pick. I got a lot of crap for that, but I said if Texas does what they should and get to that 10-11 win ceiling, it's going to be on the back of Bijan Robinson. Bijan's gone now. It is Quinn's show, and he's going to have to drive this vehicle forward. We've talked about it. There's no excuse for Texas to not reach this ceiling. So if they do, who's everybody going to give the credit to, and deservedly so? It'll be the quarterback of the Longhorns.
What about you, Adam? Give me some offensive names you're looking forward to they're not named Quinn Ewers.
Okay. For me, I have a couple names. Jarrett Bradley, wide receiver from Texas Tech. I think almost a lock for first team All Big 12. I stay in the wide receiver group. Jalil Farouk. I'm excited to see what Oklahoma does without Marvin Mims, because he was their passing offense last year. And another guy, I'm sure you know, Brennan Thompson. He transferred from Texas. He is fast. And I think that Oklahoma offense is going to be very exciting to watch with Farouk and Thompson and Dylan Gabriel. So there's a couple of names I'm looking forward to seeing.
Yeah, and I think I'll give a shout out to be a little bit of a homer here, but Jatavian Sanders, tight end at Texas. I think he has potential to be an All-American this year. I know everyone talks about Brock Bowers at Georgia, but I mean, the guy's a monster. I would not be too surprised if he's, talked about or potentially goes in the first round as, the top two tight ends in the country, going into the draft. But let's bounce over to defense. Adam, I'll start with you on defense, but give me a name or two you're excited to watch, for the Big 12 this year.
For me, we mentioned them earlier. I think Mitch mentioned them. Kobe Savage. I love the way he plays. I love his game. I think he's gonna have to make a lot of plays for Kansas State next year, and I think he will, because I think Kansas State's gonna be very good. So that's one name. It wouldn't surprise me if he won Defensive Player of the Year. Another name, Tony Bradford Jr. from Texas Tech, defensive lineman. He's looking to put his name into the draft stock. Looking at him, and of course, I'm gonna be a homer at least once. So happy he decided to come back. Jalen Ford, love him. Ready to see what he does next year. I don't think he wins it again, because it's hard to, but I'm excited to watch him play. I love watching him play.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a monster. But Mitch, what about you? Give me a name or two that you're excited to watch on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, Jalen Ford is absolutely the real deal. I think he's going to be a showstopper this year. Kobe Bryant, cornerback at Kansas, I think should hopefully have another really solid season. He's not the biggest guy at only 6 foot, but boy, he plays with a chip on his shoulder. He's a fun corner to have. I think Josh Newton stepping in as cornerback 1 for TCU. He's going to have all the lights on him, right? He's going to get everybody's best shot. Hopefully he's able to replace Hodges Tomlinson. And then I'll throw in another name for fun, because he was at one time committed to my team, Kendall Daniels. First team All-American as a redshirt sophomore. Really, really fun player, tall player too. 6'4", rangy corner. I'm really excited to see how Daniels continues to develop. And guys, you mentioned Jatavian Sanders. I'll say this: I was not a believer in him as a tight end until that catch that he made in the state semifinals. I want to say against Highland Park, where he just standing both feet flat on the ground, reached up with one hand, caught that. I was in the broadcast booth doing the radio call for that game, and my broadcast partner and I, exclaimed at the touchdown, and then really just weren't sure what to say. It was such a show of I'm better than you. Here's how. And in that moment, I went, okay, he can play tight end at Texas, and he's done a great job.
It's like watching him play with a Nerf ball, just grabbing it right
Literally.
over someone. It's out of control.
Yeah.
And then do we have anyone who we're talking about for newcomer of the year? Any thoughts about people making big splashes in their first season in the Big 12? I'll let Adam, I'll let you go first, but either of you guys want to shout out a name or two?
There's obvious ones, John Reese Plumlee, those guys. But I'm gonna pick Treshaun Ward from Kansas State. I think he's gonna be splitting carries with DJ, but I really liked him at Florida State. I think he'd be able to, towards the middle end of the year, kind of get the bulk of the carries. And I think if Kansas State does well, it's going to be because of him. So I'm going with Treshaun Ward as a dark horse, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I know I talked about it during the preview, but John Reese Plumlee, oh my God, just watching him, I'm not secretly, very glad that they're not playing Texas this year, because those are the games that Texas normally, drops if they have someone just make wild plays against them. So he's going to be my newcomer of the year, with his new coming team and Gus Malzahn's offense. But what about you, Mitch? Who do you think we got for newcomer of the year?
Those are my two names as well. Treshaun Ward's going to be special at Kansas State. I'm as a Florida State believer, I was sad to see him go. And John Reese Plumlee, he's going to tear up some defenses this year.
Yeah, and I'll do another plug for our Big 12 Focus article. Wrote about Keaton Slovis. Fantastic article from Brendan. So if you haven't, pick up the magazine, take a look. We got our preseason polls, our rankings for people to watch in the draft, and some player profiles as well. But rounding it out a little bit, we already talked about a lot of the big games to watch. Obviously, Bedlam, Texas, Oklahoma Red River rivalry, and then obviously the Is Texas back game against Alabama. So any other big games other than that you guys are looking forward to? Maybe trap games. I know you mentioned the SMU game, Mitch, but Mitch, I'll go to you first. A game or two you're looking forward to watching?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you guys are right on the money with Texas Tech, the season finale for the Red Raiders and the Longhorns, I mean, that is going to be must-see TV. I think it's going to be as that rivalry has developed anyway, but imagine a spot in Arlington is on the line, and hand me a plate of Thanksgiving leftovers and let's ride, man.
Yeah, and see if they can, that could be a spoiler game either way, but we'll see. But Adam, what about you? Any big game you're looking forward to watching this year?
For me, I think this is where a part of the Big 12 championship is going to be decided. Kansas State at Texas Tech, week 6. I think that game, that tiebreaker, is going to be very important. That's one of the games I have circled, and I was also really both teams' first litmus test, I guess, in a conference. So that is a game I am definitely going to be watching.
And we'll round it out with who we think is going to be in the Big 12 playoff, or in the Big 12 final, and who comes away with the title. So who makes it, who comes out on top? I'll start with you, Mitch, but who do we got walking away, holding the belt, potentially bringing the Big 12 back to the playoff?
Yeah, so I spoiled it earlier. Despite where my diploma comes from, I'm all aboard Texas bandwagon this year. I do think that they
welcome,
play Kansas.
Man, welcome.
Yeah, I do think they play Kansas State in Arlington. I think Kansas State does have a chance to defend their title, but this year I don't think they're going to get it done. I think there are way too many factors in favor of the Longhorns, and like I said, they're haven't gone through our playoff picks yet on our podcast, but fairly confident Texas is going to be one of those 4 seeds.
Yes, Mitch, I'm gonna send you some merch. welcome, brother. Welcome to the dark
Yeah.
side.
Yeah, I think this is Texas to lose. I know we already talked about it. I know you guys are hot on Oklahoma, and I know Adam, you're hot on Texas Tech. I think Kansas State's the just going to be continuously the factor of the last hurdle to get over, potentially at the end of the season for the Big 12 title. But I think it's Texas to lose. I think they go into the playoff and potentially undefeated, and this is their season to really stick it to everyone who makes fun of the Texas's back memes as they go into the SEC. But what do you think, Adam?
I have Texas as well, unbiased. I want to add unbiased, and then I've been talking about on my podcast. I have Texas Tech. I think they beat Kansas State. Kansas State comes to Lubbock. I think that's a difference maker. And then I have Texas beating Texas Tech in the championship. Do they make the playoffs? I don't know. I think they lose some games.
Has there ever been a back-to-back in the 12 championship game where the season finale was also the Big 12 championship game? Because that's what it would be this year if Adam's right.
That's a good question. I'm not sure.
Think so.
I think the Big 12 has worked to make sure that's never been the case. Like that's why Bedlam has moved around in the past. So I don't know if that's ever happened or not, but that would be fascinating to see Texas and Texas Tech kick off and then tee it up the next week. I mean, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I don't think that has ever happened.
Yeah, no, that would be incredible. But yeah, that's our Big 12 preview. We'll do a little bit of a plug here, but if you have not bought the magazine, the preview magazine is $9.99. You can find the link at any one of our socials. It's definitely going to be in the description for this podcast. Find us on Twitter at the Transfer Portal
CFB.
CFB, excuse me. And this has been the Transfer Portal CFB presented by No Context College Football. Hey, we're getting there, man. We're getting there. But I just want to throw it around the room just to close this out. Adam, I'll start with you, but any plug for articles, any other stuff we got coming up, what to look forward for outside of our preview magazine?
Just follow the socials, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. We have a lot of stuff going on. Season's here. We're locked in.
Season's here, man. We're down to a month away. So what about you, Mitch?
Yeah, we've got a series going, 5 key storylines for each conference right now that's up on the Transfer Portal CFB website. For folks that have followed over the last couple of months, the partnership that we've had at the 3 Tech Pod with you guys has been a ton of fun. It's just allowed us to create a lot of video and written content, especially. And we're excited to go into our first full season with you guys. So let's ride. Yeah, super excited. I'm going to be starting to write a little bit more about some of the gambling side of college football. I'm super excited to get into that with some of the previews and futures. I know we talked a little bit about over and unders on this, so look out for that. And with that, that's all we have here today. This has been the Transfer Portal CFB podcast powered by No Context CFB.
Wash your hands.